our 12-lecture introductory course on the study of Buddhism. As you may know, we've put this course together so that we can understand, study the Buddhist tradition in the context of a larger comparative course on the great religious traditions of the world, so that we can see some of the distinctive things about Buddhist experience in the larger context of the religious experience of human beings more generally. But I should say to you right at the very beginning that the Buddhist tradition is particularly close to my heart. I've spent most of my adult life exploring the twists and turns in Buddhist traditions across the continent of Asia and also in Buddhist communities here in North America. And I find Buddhism endlessly fascinating. And I'm delighted to be able to share some of that fascination with you. Now, when you come to Buddhism, after you've been studying many of the other major religious traditions in the world, you have to be prepared, I'd say, for some significant surprises. Many aspects of Buddhism will seem familiar to you, I suspect. Buddhists tell a story, like Christians or Muslims, about the founder of their tradition. His name was Siddhartha Gautama. He lived in northern India around 500 years or so before the Common Era, and he was known to his followers as the Buddha, or the Awakened One. Like Jesus and Muhammad, he developed a very distinctive response to the religious problems of his day, and he started a religious movement that now spans the globe, from India and Southeast Asia, across Northern Asia to China, Japan, Korea, and Tibet, and in the last 100 years or so, to Europe, North America, and other parts of the world. Now, you might ask yourselves, right at the very beginning of our course, beginning of our discussion together, how the Buddha, as a founder of a religious tradition, differs from other founders. Jesus and Muhammad brought messages, as if they were people communicating some sort of a message from divine reality that their followers were then meant to heed and respond to. The Buddha, unlike Jesus and Muhammad, serves, shall we say, more as an example. It isn't that he brings a divine message. He gives us an example of behavior that we as human beings are invited to follow in order to achieve a goal that's very similar to the goal that he achieved in his own life. Now, the Buddha also put together a community of followers, like other major founders of other significant religious traditions. In his case, it was an order of monks and nuns who passed on a tradition of Buddhist learning and practice, just as the Christian monks and nuns did in Europe in the Middle Ages, and in many parts of the Christian world today. During our course, we'll want to get some sense of how this society of monks and nuns operates and how it establishes its relationships with Buddhist kings and queens and princes and all of the ordinary lay people who make up the structure of Buddhist society. Buddhists also have very familiar patterns of ritual and worship. They go on pilgrimages to important shrines. Just a few years ago, I was in Tibet and joined a group of really remarkable pilgrims from eastern Tibet who went up to one of the major mountain peaks in central Tibet and circumambulated, walked around the mountain peak to pay homage to the different shrines that were associated with different saints at each point along the route. These pilgrimages are not unlike the sacred pilgrimages that occur in the Christian tradition, a pilgrimage to Lourdes, for example, or a pilgrimage to some of the great holy sites in Eastern Europe. Buddhists also mark the stages of life with rites of passage, like baptism in Christianity or a bar mitzvah in Judaism. So we'll be looking in the course of our study at these patterns of ritual, worship, pilgrimage, rites of passage that make Buddhist life distinctive and pass on the teaching of the Buddha. And I think we'd have to say, in our own way, we'll make a pilgrimage of our own as we move across Asia, studying the different aspects of the Buddhist tradition in different countries of Asia. Buddhists also teach people how to confront and deal with some of the deepest questions of Buddhist life, not unlike people in other religious traditions. They're concerned about issues that confront all of us as human beings. What will happen to me when I die? How can I live my life in a way that will be happy, peaceful, compassionate, and free from suffering? These are questions that concern all of us as human beings. Buddhists have distinctive and in many respects very powerful answers to these questions. Now, all of these are familiar issues, issues that we have encountered in one way or another in other religious traditions. I suspect we've encountered them whether we've studied those religious traditions in a formal sense or not. But some aspects of Buddhism will challenge our assumptions about the nature of religion itself. When I start out the study of Buddhism with my students at Boston University, I hand out on a piece of paper a standard dictionary definition of religion that I've taken from a dictionary that I've used for years since I was a college student myself, and it goes something like this. Religion is the service and adoration of God or a God expressed in forms of worship. And I suspect that all of you, if I could ask you to jot down in an intuitive sense, just in a very quick way, what you think religion is, I suspect that the word God would appear somewhere in that definition. Now, Buddhists do worship gods. Gods are a part of Buddhist life. Gods are important in some aspects of Buddhist ritual, but Buddhists deny the existence of one single, almighty, powerful God who created the world. The Buddha is simply a human being, just like us, who confronted some of the great difficulties of life and worked out a human response. So when we study Buddhism as part of the religious traditions of the world, as one of the major religious traditions in a series like this, we have to confront the possibility that religion can be worked out on the deepest level without a concern for a creator, God. That will challenge our understanding of what religion itself is. Buddhists instead ask questions like this. What is ultimate reality? What does it mean for something to be ultimately real? How can I know it? And does it, in the end, love me? A great religious question of Buddhist form. Another aspect of Buddhism that will be surprising and challenging to us has to do with the nature of the self. Many religious traditions emphasize the importance of an immortal soul. If you've encountered, as part of this larger course or in some other context, the Hindu tradition, you know that for Hindus, identifying the nature of the immortal soul and finding some way to separate that soul from the confusion of ordinary, everyday experience is one of the crucial goals of human life. This is not so in Buddhism. Buddhists say that a human personality is a bit like a river, constantly flowing, or like a fire that's constantly burning. The soul itself is not eternal. It doesn't endure. It's constantly part of a changeable process. So the idea of an immortal soul is simply an illusion that we as human beings impose out of our own psychological or emotional needs on a process of constant change. So Buddhist ideas of the self will challenge us to think in new ways about some basic questions, some questions that belong to all of us as human beings. Who am I? What am I really? And how can I develop my full potential as a human being? Now, what's true for for human beings, of course, is also true for Buddhism itself. Like everything else in the world, Buddhism is constantly changing. As we consider in our own study together in this 12-lecture series, as we consider the astonishing varieties of Buddhism that evolved in India and elsewhere in Asia, we'll have to ask ourselves another set of questions. What actually is Buddhism? What do we mean by that word? Are there any values, practices, or religious commitments that remain constant through this extraordinary process of cultural change? These are questions that come up in a particularly sharp form in the study of Buddhism, but they really apply to all of the other religious traditions in the world as well. Now, these are the challenges that lie ahead of us in this 12-lecture series. If these are our questions, how should we organize our study of Buddhism so that we can tackle them in the most direct and effective way? Now, here I think we have to take some guidance from Buddhists themselves. The most basic Buddhist expression of faith, one that's very commonly repeated when Buddhists perform their daily devotions or when a person begins to express a Buddhist identity and loyalty to the Buddhist tradition, is called the triple refuge. I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma,